All right. What's up? I'm back. I said I'd be back. No one's watching the video anyway, so it doesn't matter. All right, this is going to be the video you can roast me on. It's going to be all embarrassing and shit. But we're going to talk about some philosophical topics pertaining to males and male identity and society in general. But before we get into that, I wanted to give a big shout out to my main man, Tucker Carlson. He just posted this 9/11 video where he's having an interview with one of the victims of 9/11 spouses. And I watched about the first 20 minutes of it. It's real solid. High quality as always when you expect from Tucker. So the link for that is in the description. And let's get into it. All right. So we're going to be talking about gore. And why I haven't really talked about this before is because, well, the name of the book might be offensive to some people since it's called The Slave Girl of Gore. And also, I might have done some IRC chat roleplay in gore. Yeah, a little bit nerdy, but, you know, us nerds got to stick together. So, the first thing we're going to do is look at who John Norman is. He's the author of the book. Now, a lot of people that did the roleplay, well, actually, let me start off. Reading the book is mandatory for doing the roleplay, at least the first book. Some people have read all the books, and depends. But the first thing you'll notice, a lot of people don't like his actual writing style. And as far as what I gathered from information from being like in the community or whatever, just an online community, not real life or anything, was that basically he was like a philosopher and sociologist, and he predicted the coming of feminism. And so the book was a way for him to encapsulate all of the prior patriarchal cultures from the past. Like it's like Northern Europe, like the Arabic culture, African culture. I don't think he goes too much into like American, like Native American culture, but those three you'll see, like they don't call them that, but it's like a theme that's in the book once you kind of have like a level of understanding of what he's actually talking about and not just reading it as a fiction book. That's really what he was trying to like almost make like a time capsule, because I guess he predicted that people wouldn't even like be able to like imagine what it was like to live in a patriarchal society like before, you know, feminism. So that's what I gathered like from, you know, being in the actual like Gorean community. That's like the spirit of the book. But we'll look at Wikipedia and see what Wikipedia has to say about it too, because I haven't read this yet. All right. John Frederick Lang Jr., born June 3rd, 1931, is an American writer who, as John Norman, has authored the Gore series of science fantasy novels. Norman was also a philosophy professor. Okay. His academic career. Lang earned his PhD in 1963 from Princeton University. His dissertation was named In Defense of Ethical Naturalism, an examination of certain aspects of naturalistic fallacy, with particular attention to the logic of an open question argument. I might be interested to look into that later. Lang summed it up in an interview by saying, "If one cannot make sense of morality within some sort of satisfying natural context, then one is likely to end up with no morality, which is less than societally reassuring, or is likely to end up with a competitive plethora of moralities in which 99% of the world's population is convinced that the other 99% is unclean, stupid, uninformed, vicious, depraved, in need of coercive correction, and such. That, too, seems less than reassuring. Okay. Norman's fiction attained popularity in the 1970s and early 1980s with an estimated 6 to 12 million copies sold. John Norman's Gorian Saga is a long-running series of adventure science fantasy novels starting in December 1966 with Tarnsmen of Gore. The series was put on hold after its 25th installment, Magicians of Gore, in 1988 when DAW refused to publish its successor, Witness of Gore. After several unsuccessful attempts to find a trade publishing outlet, the series was brought back into print in 2001 with the publication of Witness of Gore. Norman has also produced a separate science fiction series, the Telnarian Histories, plus 3 other fiction works, 5 nonfiction works, and a collection of 30 short stories. Norman has said that his 3 major influences on his work are Homer, Freud, and Nietzsche. According to Norman, his Gore books are science fiction or adventure fantasy works, which are also intellectual, philosophical, and psychological novels. His fiction depicts fantasy worlds where male-dominated bondage relationships are natural and widely practiced and respected culturally, whereas characteristics of modern society are criticized and philosophical themes are explored, especially from a Nietzschean view. Although the bondage in his imaginative sex guide is directed to sexual practices, the bondage and slavery presented in Gore follows along the lines of societal or legal slavery, a common way of life as reflected in ancient Rome and other societies. While the philosophy presented is unquestionably that of male dominance, male characters themselves are occasionally enslaved by powerful females. In an interview with Polygraph magazine, Norman stated that he believes that it is obvious that all societies are based on dominance and hierarchy. Despite his books being associated with BDSM, Norman is openly critical of the community. In 2011 interview with Gizmodo, he stated, "I disassociate myself from BDSM, at least as I understand it. I may, of course, misunderstand it. I wonder if one would settle merely for real-life Gorian slavery because, as I understand it, BDSM is not Gorian. If something is not beautiful, it is not Gorian." His fiction works cover philosophy, ethics, and historiography. Okay, so and then there's like a subculture, like the online MMORPG, that was me, and the IRC chat relay, that was me. There's a lot of funny stuff in the book, and some of the people play like really funny characters. Well, my character that I played was basically like some guy who he went out for water one day when he was a young boy, and then when he came back, his village had been burned and marauded or whatever, and then so he left, and it was that was what it was. But it happened like a week before he was supposed to go through his male initiation. That was my story, that my character went out for water a week before his male initiation, and then when he came back, his village was destroyed, and then so he had to wander in the woods for years, eating only sticks and berries until he wandered upon a town finally, and then that's when I would start role-playing with the people in the town. That was my role. But there was this one woman, oh my God, she was so funny. She was like role-playing with her husband, and she's like, yeah, all those like young slave women that we keep getting, they're so clumsy. They keep on falling into the alligator pit. I don't know how that keeps happening. I just don't remember that. It was so funny. It's like, yeah, every time my husband gets a new slave girl, they just trip and fall into the alligator pit. All right. Enough comedy. All right, you can check out the book here more, but we're going to go to an actual Gorian website. And this is one of the topics that I wanted to really get into. That's one of the main, I think, like male psychological points that he's trying to make in the book that has nothing to do really with women. Then I have a couple other points that might be taken as something that we can even look for as going into like marriages and stuff like that. Okay, what he says, the Homestone. Here's my narrative on the subject. I wish you well, Vagabond. The Homestone. The topic of the Homestone is monumentous. By monumentous, I mean no other topic spoken of among Gorians carries more weight or significance. It is never to be taken lightly or joked about. In fact, there is a saying on Gore, a saying whose origins is lost in the past of this strange planet. The one who speaks of homestones should stand, for matters of honor are here involved, and honor is respected in the barbaric codes of Gore. Tarnsman of Gore, Book 1, page 27. Now, I am well aware that there are deep-seated emotions, feelings, opinions, thoughts, and mindsets when it comes to homestones. So much so that this topic can lead to harsh comments, hurt feelings, and if in person, even lead to blows. That is not the purpose of this narrative. My intention is, instead, to present to you what the books have to say. To urge you to get your books out of your back room off the shelf, and then please compare what I show you here with what you may have heard before. And finally, just reason with me on what the book tells us. Okay, this is the guy giving, because that's what they do. They kind of like debate about, it's kind of like Star Trek, where they like debate about what the book like says and stuff like that, and like what's the actual like thing in the book. Okay. Yes, the homestone is shown to be discussed with slaves, for the slave is not stupid. It is not that the slave cannot understand the import of the homestone. It is only that as a slave, the slave does not or cannot claim a homestone as their own. So do not concern yourself with homestones, he said. They are beyond your kin. You are only a slave. And yes, master, she says. But one can are a free woman? Surely, he said, and the penalties for that can be grievous, particularly if a homestone is shared. What is your homestone? You are a slave. You may not have one, he said. Do not concern yourself with the matter. Right. I'm trying to find some quotes from the book, because he's just basically giving the pitch as to why it should be seen this way. Okay. Perhaps the most significant difference between the man of Earth and the Gorian is that the Gorian has a home stone, and the man of Earth does not. It is difficult to make clear to a non-Gorian the significance of the homestone, for the non-Gorian has never had a homestone and thus cannot understand its meaning, its reality. I think that I shall not make too clear what is the significance to the Gorian of the homestone. It would be difficult to put into words. Indeed, it is perhaps impossible to put into words. I shall not try. I think this is one of the saddest things about the men of Earth. They have no homestone. Another quote. If you have a homestone, I need not speak. If you do not have a homestone, how could you understand what I might say? see what I'm saying? So it's like this thing. Basically, they're not. He's explaining the quotes and stuff, but basically, in the book, each tribe or clan or whatever has a homestone, right? And this homestone could be any type of rock. It could be a small pebble. It could be a hand size like rock. It could be a polished rock. It could just be a ground, like a rough stone with no shape. It could be a sphere, a cube. It doesn't matter. What matters is that the homestone was passed down from the patriarch of the tribe to the next patriarch of the tribe, to the next patriarch of the tribe, to the next patriarchy of the tribe. And that was what they were fighting all the wars over in the book, where that each tribe was trying to get the other tribe's homestone, right? And they would have the homestones in like a pile of stones out in the open, almost like challenging other people to come and try and take my homestone. And then they would have wars over the homestone, and then they would have to try to find the homestone, get the homestone. And if you took somebody else's homestone, then basically you can enslave them. Right? So that's what the homestone is. So now he's kind of talking more, now you kind of more understand what he's talking about. He circled me widely. Beware, he said. I carry a homestone. I stood back and made no move to draw my weapon. I thought I was of the castle of warriors and he of peasants. I am armed and he is carrying naught but a crude tool. I would not dispute his passage. One does not lightly dispute the passage of one who carries his homestone. Beware, cried the driver through the rain to men below me, beside the wagon. I carry a homestone on this wagon. The three men looked at one another and then backed away. They would not choose to do business with one who carried a homestone, even though there were 3 to 2 renegades of Gore. Okay. Even the name of Gore itself in all the languages of the planet Gore means homestone. The common expression for the sun is Tortu Gore, and it means light upon the homestone. Homestones can be various of different colors, shapes, and sizes. Many of them are intricately carved, but they can also be small and rather insignificant looking. Regardless of size or shape, where a man sets his homestone, he claims, by law, that land for himself. When you think of a city and its homestone, what mental image comes to your mind? In other words, what is a city? Is it the walls, the buildings, the timber, the stones? No. Instead, the city is defined by its homestone. What do I mean? I mean, if all the walls, all the buildings, all the timber, all the stones were flattened, destroyed, gone, but the homestone remained, the city would still live. On the other hand, if the homestone were to be moved somewhere else, all the walls and the buildings and the timbers and the stones exactly as they are would not be a city. Here are some examples of this. Are, for a time, kept within the city, the homestones of cities it had conquered. By doing so, are, so to speak, held the life of these other cities. The other cities still stood. There were walls and shops and homes and fields, and people still lived there. But there was no life without the homestone. The stones and timbers were nothing. After the defeat of Pakur, the homestone of these 12 cities were returned, and those men who had served from those cities were allowed to return to their cities rejoicing. Now, one of the more poignant quotes on this, I look at my father. I am sorry. I said, Kol Rabbah was destroyed. My father laughed. Kol Rabbah was not destroyed, he said. I was puzzled. for I myself had looked upon the valley of Korabah and seen that the city had vanished. Here, said my father, reaching into a leather sack that he wore slung about his shoulder, is Korabah. And he drew forth the small flat homestone of the city in which Gorian custom invest the meaning, the significance, the reality of the city itself. Korabah cannot be destroyed, said my father, for its homestone has not perished. My father had taken the stone from the city before it had been destroyed. For years he carried it on his own person. I took the small stone in my hands and kissed it, for it was the homestone of the city to which I had pledged my sword, where I had ridden my first tarn, where I had met my father after an interval of more than 20 years, where I had found new friends, and to which I had taken Telena, my love, the daughter of Marlanus, once companion. And here, too, is Korabah, I said, pointing to the proud giant, the older Tarl, and the tiny, sandy-haired scribe, Torn. Yes, said my father, here too is Korabah, not only in the particles of its homestone, but in the hearts of its men. And we 4 men of Korabah clasped hands, priest kings of Gore. Notice, despite the fact that the city had vanished, Korabah lived because Tarl's father said Korabah cannot be destroyed, for its homestone has not perished. And 2, the city lived in the hearts of those men of that city. Another example. Bring the homestone of the city, commanded Kamshak, and the stone, oval and age, carved with the initial letter of the city was brought to him. He lifted the stone over his head and read fear into the eyes of the 2 men chained before him. But he did not dash the stone on the floor. Rather, he arose from his throne and placed the stone in the chained hands of Phanius Tarmus. Taria lives, he said, Ubar. Tears formed in the eyes of Phanius Tarmus, and he held the homestone of the city to his heart. Nomads of Gore. A city cannot die while its homestone survives. Assassins of Gore. It does not count, I trust, I asked, being your camp as part of the realm of Ar? Marlanius laughed. No, he said. Ar is where the homestone of Ar lies. Hunters of Gore. What of a city that does not have a homestone? And what of Port Car? I asked. She has no homestone, said one of the men. I smiled. It was true. Port Car, of all the cities on Gore, was the only one that had no homestone. I did not know if men did not love her because she had no homestone, or that she had no homestone because men did not love her. Okay, this is the second point he wants you to take away from this narrative. As I just showed you from the books, a hut or a huge group of buildings is not truly alive without a homestone, just as much as the place will die if that homestone leaves or is broken. But nowhere is the thought of the homestone and city synonymous. In other words, they are not one and the same. For the sake of my argument, to get you to think on this point, think of the homestone as the heart of the city. Does that make sense? Now, if you replace the word heart for homestone in every reference you make, you are giving proper honor to the most sacred thing, which is Gorian. What do I mean? Have you read somewhere else where someone says, the homestone of the city is recruiting all castes. We welcome you to our homestone. Before you enter, read the rules of our homestone. Can you replace the word heart with the word homestone in any of those examples? Think the next time you are going to use homestone in a sentence. Will heart work instead? If not, don't use homestone. Does this life, this aura, this heart apply only to cities? There's a quote. I looked at the homestone in the hut. In this hut, for it was here that his homestone resided. Thurnus was sovereign. In this hut, even had he been a lowly man or beggar, he, because of the presence in it of his homestone, was Ubar. A palace without a homestone is but a hovel. A hovel which contains a homestone is a palace. In this house, this hut, this palace, Thurnius was the supremacy. Here he might do as he pleased. His rights in his house, his supremacy in his place, was acknowledged by all guests. They shared the hospitality of his homestone. Slave girl of Gore. How about the homestone, you claim? How important is it to you? Describe to me, he said, the homestone of R. She looked down, confused. She could not do so. I cannot, she stammered. Shall I have you taken before the magistrates of R, he inquired, to substantiate your claim of citizenship? No, she said, no. She looked at him terrified. To claim a homestone as one's own when it is not is a serious offense among Gorians. Okay, what about the citizenship ceremony? R, said one, is no more. She perished in the Delta, said another. I am surprised to hear such sentiments, I said, from those who must once have held and kissed the homestone of R. This was a reference to the citizenship ceremony following the oath of allegiance to the city. Involved an actual touching of the city's homestone. This may be the only time in the life of a citizen of the city that they actually touch the homestone. In R, in as many cities, citizenship is confirmed in a ceremony of this sort. Non-performance of this ceremony upon reaching intellectual majority can he cause for the expulsion from the city. The rationale seems to be that the community has the right to expect allegiance from its members. Does this apply to women also? Of course it does. The free woman is a person. She is a citizen. She has standing before the law. She has a homestone. She is noble, lofty, and exalted. The slave, on the other hand, is property and an animal. Gorian free women can be difficult and troublesome, but the pain that Gorian men will accept from their free women, in deference to their freedom and their sharing of a homestone, they do not and will not accept in their slaves. So basically, they will accept a lot of difficulty from their free women, their wives. Those that share a common homestone look after and protect everyone else who shares their homestone. Commonality of homestone extends beyond concepts with which you are familiar, such as shared citizenship, for example. It is more like brotherhood, but not so much in the attenuated, cheap, abstract sense in which those of earth commonly speak glibly, so loosely of brotherhood. It is more analogous to brotherhood in the sense of jealously guarded membership in a proud ancient family, one that has endured through centuries, a family bound together by fidelity, honor, history, and tradition. If you are interested in this sort of thing from a Gorian viewpoint, I said, Free men and women are usually attentive to the thoughts and feelings of one another. Not only are they free, but they may even share a homestone. Two soldiers would cut one down with their steel blades for an acre of fertile ground, will fight side by side to the death for the homestone of their village or of the city within whose ambit their village lies. So you get that that's like deep right there. Tarnsman of Gore, Book 1. Women are protected. To make this matter more clear and to be fairer to the customs of Gore, it should be noted that any woman whatsoever with whom one does not share a homestone is understood to be fair game for the capture loop. There is pride in the city. Goreans tend to keep their streets very well. The streets are, after all, the streets of their city, and their city is, after all, the place of their homestone. What of someone who has no homestone? You have no homestone? Said the bearded man. I shuddered. In such a fashion, he had informed the small fellow that he was not such that one need keep faith with him. In such a fashion, he informed the small fellow that he was not such that one need to keep faith with him. I'm not sure if I get that completely. There is a Gorean saying that only priest kings, outlaws, and slaves lack homestones. Strictly, of course, that is an oversimplification. For example, animals of all sorts, such as tarsks and vair, as well as slaves, do not have homestones. 2. Anyone whose citizenship, for whatever reason, is rescinded or revoked with due process of law, is no longer entitled to the protections and rights of that polity's homestone. That homestone is then no longer his. This suggested to me again that the small fellow might have been cast out of Tharna, perhaps exiled. Wait. Who has no homestone? The wretched, evil, disgusting people? No, only priest kings, outlaws, and slaves. Can someone who has been banned, or in other words, lost rights to the homestone, ever get these back? Yes. Why would one think of her in the terms of a Ubara? I asked. Sworn from Marlanus, she is no longer his daughter. I am not a scribe of the law, he said. I do not know. I do not think she has a homestone, I said. Genius Laelius permitted her to kiss the homestone. He said, it was done in a public ceremony, since she is once again a citizeness of R. Okay. This next quote is rather lengthy, but I believe it speaks more to the subject from the books themselves than I can adequately express. Okay. I wondered about the homestones of Gore. Many seem small and quite plain. Yet, for these stones, and on account of these stones, these seemingly inauspicious, simple objects, cities have been built and burned, armies have clashed, strongmen have wept, empires have risen and fallen. The simplicity of many of these stones has puzzled me. I have wondered sometimes how it is that they have become invested with such import. They may, of course, somewhat simply be thought of as symbolizing various things, and perhaps different things to different people. They can stand, for example, for a city, and indeed are sometimes identified with the city. They have some affinity too, surely, with territoriality and community. Even a remote hut far from the paved avenues of a town or city, may have a homestone, and therein, in the place of his homestone, is the meanest beggar or poorest peasant, a ubar. The homestone says, "This place is mine. This is my home. I am here." But I think often that it is a mistake to try to translate the homestone into meanings. It is not a word or a sentence. It does not really translate. It is more like a tree or the world. It exists, which goes beyond, which surpasses meaning. Basically saying it's transcendent. In this primitive sense, the homestone is simply that, and irreducibly the homestone. It is too important, too precious, too mean. And in not meaning, it becomes, of course, the most meaningful of all. It becomes, in a sense, the foundation of meaning, and for Goreans, it is anterior to meaning and precedes meaning. Do not ask a Gorean what the homestone means, because he will not understand your question. It will puzzle him. It is the homestone. Sometimes I think that many homestones are so simple because they are too important, too precious to be insulted with decorations or embellishments. And then, too, sometimes I think that they are kept, on the whole, simple, because this is a way of saying that everything is important and precious and beautiful. The small stones by the river, the leaves of the tree, the tracks of the small animals, a blade of grass, a drop of water, a grain of sand, the world. Magicians of Gore, page 25. Oh, book 25. Some believe that a person will have more than one homestone. This theory is based on this one sentence. But not only is it the case that each city has its homestone, the simplest and humblest village, and even the most primitive hut in that village, perhaps only one cone of the straw, will contain its own homestone. They focus on the word "and," that both the village and the hut contain its own homestone. Is this proof that everyone has two homestones, one in their personal dwelling and yet another in the village, town, or city in which they live? Here again, we need to reason on the overall theme of what the book tells us of homestones, and we need to read about homestones in context, and the quote given to support multiple homestones is no exception. The very next sentence following the above quote goes on to say, "My homestone was the homestone of Koroba, that city to which I had 7 years ago pledged my sword." If indeed, as fundamental as the homestone is to every Gorean, Tarl had more than one, why does he state "my homestone" singular? Why does he not say something like, "In my case, I have the homestone of my personal dwelling and the homestone of Koroba"? In doing further research on this theory, I also found where Tarl's father said in this book, on page 27, said this in, "I shall show you some day," he said, "my small homestone which I keep in my chambers." Did Matthew then go on to tell his son Tarl that he needed to get his own personal homestone? No. Instead, Matthew goes on to say this, "And someday it may be yours." His eyes seemed moist. He added, "If you shall live to earn a homestone." Nowhere else in all of the more than 165 quotes within the book where the homestone is referenced is the concept of multiple homestones shown. If it is that multiple homestones are the norm, and as important as the homestone is, the theory of multiple homestones would be shown throughout the series. So now I'll end with this one last thought. Think carefully on the full depth and meaning of these two sentences, simple sentences. Do you love the city so? I asked. Samos smiled. It is the place of my homestone, he said. Right, so you kind of get the picture. Like, the homestone is like the thing that you pass down through generations, and it's basically, I guess, what you would say, your basic presupposition that forms their entire language. Like, without the homestone, and it gives them like a teleology, like a purpose. Protecting the homestone is the purpose of the citizen of that homestone, and that's the entire teleology of their society. Right? That's what they're saying. They're saying that basically the homestone is a presupposition. The homestone itself is a presupposition, and that guarding the presupposition itself is the basis of the society, of the language of the society, and everything flows from the teleology of defending the homestone. All right. But then they also have this other concept of free marriage that I want to get into, because I think that this is something that is interesting about marriage or whatever, is that, I mean, truly it really is only for to raise children. And in this book, you know, they have the free people, and in fact, even when you because I don't have one specifically on marriage. Oh, here we go. Wife. So basically in the book, even if a guy wants to marry, like have children with one of his slaves, he has to actually free her first from slavery, so that way that his children will be born as free citizens. So it's, you know, it's a really complicated, like, he's really get deep into it. Like, he really goes there, you know, he basically, like I said, the three societies that he really dives deep into their like description of how it used to be before is basically like, you know, a Northern European type Germanic, like a kind of like Northwest European British type of thing, the Arabics and the Africans, right? And he's saying that basically that's how it was in all the societies, and he's like, really, like, it's like a time capsule that he's trying to like send to men, because he knew that feminism was going to take over. And so when you read, it's like, you know, for a lot, especially younger guys, like you can't even conceptualize it. Like, you know, like I kind of can, because my grandpa, he was born in like 1920. You know, they didn't even have TV and stuff when he was born. They barely, it was like they just had gotten cars and stuff like that, like the first cars and like radio and stuff like that. So they were living it, you know, and they lived on farms. So he kind of was able to impart some of that wisdom to me in certain ways. And, you know, them bringing me down south all the time to kind of understand where they came from and stuff. But, like, you know, for a young guy, I'm not saying do this, be like, go nuts on, it's like, it's a fantasy book, but it's written by a psychologist and a philosopher. And it does give like a deep insight to how life used to be before, you know, before feminism, you know, and you can kind of see for yourself some of the things that feminists say were bad, and some of the things, you know, and you can actually see that, no, some of these things were actually good. Maybe like going around killing each other for a rock, that might have been bad. But, you know, having honor and respect for your fellow man and doing your job and, you know, all those type of things, they're all in there. And it shows how men, you know, deal with each other and how men make agreements and how men did business before the modern era. Like, that's really what it will, give you a worldview of, especially if you're like a younger guy. But let's see if it has anything about the actual marriage in here. Otherwise, I'll just explain it. I'm not going to read all this again. All right, it doesn't really have a clear thing. A lot of quotes in there, though. Okay, so I'll just break down the marriage thing real quick here. Basically, like I was saying before, you have free people, you have free women that are allowed to do whatever they want. Even in a patriarchal society where men are running around killing each other and shooting each other and chopping each other down with swords for just whispering the wrong words to each other, women still had rights. There were still women that were walking around doing whatever they wanted, pissing off their husbands and everything. Like, you know what I'm saying? And the only people that they enslaved were their enemies. Oh yeah, that was the other thing. That in Gore, the word for stranger and enemy was the same word. So stranger and enemy was synonymous in a patriarchal society, basically. So that I can see that's bad. I think we can say that's bad. That was a way of looking at the world that probably wasn't the best way to look at it. Like, oh, if I don't know this guy, time to kill him. You know what I'm saying? Oh, he'll look like me, time to kill him. Doesn't talk like me, time to kill him. Can I kill him? Time to kill him. Maybe that wasn't the best thing, but maybe men respecting each other as if they could do that was a good thing. And when we lost that ability, that to even think that could happen to you, it got bad. Things got bad. Things got worse, kind of. Okay, so we're getting into the free marriage. We're getting there. All right. Okay. So in the book, like I said before, even if you want to marry a slave, you have to free her first in order to have children with her so that your children will be born free. And there are free women that were born of free persons that are free. So you could see how that system could work, that eventually everyone could be freed through birth. Right? Because eventually they would free all the women in order to have babies with them. And then those babies that would be born free. And if they were women, they'd be free women. Right? Okay. So here we go. The marriage contract in Gore only lasted for 18 years. That struck me when I first read that. And I was like, this is genius, right? Because that's what marriage is for. It's for the children. You find yourself a free woman. And then an 18-year contract, right, for the children, specifically for the children. The teleology of their marriage, again, is for the children because they don't separate that, right? It's kind of like, you know what I'm saying? It would be like going back to say like, I don't know, like 1400s Catholic Europe. And you talk about a baby mama, like the concept, they wouldn't even understand what you're talking about. You'd be like, yeah, the woman that I had kids with. And they'd be like, your wife. And you'd be like, no. And they'd be like, And then you'd be like, the woman that I had kids with, baby mama. And they'd be like, yeah, your wife, right? They're like, you had kids with her. She's your wife. And you'd be like, no. And they'd be like, And you'd be like, you know what I'm saying? Like they wouldn't even, the concept wouldn't even like you'd be like, no, she's not my wife. She's my baby mama. And they'd be like, And they'd be like, no, that's your wife. The woman that you have children with is your wife. So it's kind of like the concept, like we've lost the teleology of the concept. The purpose of the concept, the ontology of the concept, like not the ontology, but the purpose of it, the teleology, right? And so that it seems like that's kind of like almost like a happy medium, because that's kind of what women are saying, is that they don't want to be, they want to do other stuff, and men also, we want to do stuff. We got stuff to do too. We don't always want to be like, fixing your stuff and hanging up your stuff and fixing all your stuff and carrying your stuff. We got stuff to do too. And you women have stuff to do. And the whole point of men and women getting together is to, further the human species, and that's about it. It's not for fun. It's not for hanging out time. You know what I'm saying? It's a further human species, And so that concept of the 18-year marriage, it almost seems like that's a very, I'm not saying we should do that, but it seems like it's a very like good concept. It works for both men and women because, people change over time, they do. And people go, they have different interests over time. It gets boring. You've been doing the same stuff for like 10 years. You want to do something else, and people don't always see eye to eye. People learn different facts or new information and they change their mind, but that 18-year contract for the children, that seems to make complete sense and then it's almost like, it makes it like doable too. You know what I'm saying? Because think about it, right? When we brought in like the endless marriage thing at first, let's just go back to like, Catholic Europe, 1400, 1300, 1200s, whatever, people only lived like 40, 50. I mean, like if you were like an old wise man, you're like 50 years old. You're like, oh man, I've seen it all. I'm 50 years old, I've seen everybody come and go and this and that, right? Nowadays, you know what I'm saying? I mean, people are looking at it and they're like, oh, well, marriage for life, that's like 70. If I get married when I'm 20, that's going to be like another 70 years with one person. I get it. I get it. There's a whole world out there now. We're not stuck on a farm. We're not stuck in some like, factory in a city. There's a whole world out there and everybody wants to experience it. But we've also got to, we got to further the human race though, too. That's part of the problem. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know the answer, but I mean, it's something to consider, it's definitely something to consider, because it seems like that's the problem with the marriages that people are like, oh my God, I'm going to be living and then that would also give, think about it, right? So like, let's say a woman, she graduates high school, maybe she gets like a part-time job or something like that for a little while, 20 years old, gets married, 18 years, you're 40, you're still going to be healthy and all that stuff. And according to whatever podcast, they're still going to look just as good in their 40s and 50s and maybe even 60s. So, you know what I'm saying? I mean, and you don't really, and then you don't have to have reproductive sex. So then you could go wild, like what's her name, Gwyneth Paltrow, banging 20-year-old dudes down or whatever, right? It makes sense though. I mean, I'm not saying that this is going to be the fix all of everything, but what I'm saying does make sense, right? Like that, you get the women a little bit younger than the men. Men are a little bit more established. 20 to 25-year-old women, getting married, having kids for a set period of time. And then if you want to continue the marriage for another 20 years, go ahead and let's continue that contract. Another 20, let's continue, but then it kind of gives, instead of, because that's what people are doing right now. Anyway, they're just getting married for a short period of time for the legal process of having children. And then after it doesn't, and then they get divorced. Or they're living in separate bedrooms, or they're dead bedroom, right? Or they're doing open marriage with Jay, right? And this kind of because the human mind works like that. If you feel like it's this never ending task, then it's daunting. But if you're like, okay, well, we're going to do this from this time to this time, and this is exactly what we're going to do. We're going to raise the children. We're going to do this, and we're going to do that. And then at the end of that 18 years, when the children are ready to go, then we can reevaluate our relationship and decide whether we want to continue it or we want to go our own way or whatever it is, right? Like it's not completely insane, at least. And as bad as marriage is getting now and stuff like that, I don't know. But I'll cut it off here. I've been going on for a while. Feel free to roast me in the comments. I'm a nerd. All right. Have a good day and Peace.